Here is the Prime Minister of Australia.
As long as they don't touch Mad as Hell, I'm happy.
Good evening. Well, politics is a fickle business, my friends. 1 minute you're having a passionate online relationship with a national cabinet and everything's going great. You can feel that you can accomplish anything together. And then suddenly, a week back into your old relationship with your actual cabinet in the real world of actual parliament, and you see the states and territories for what they are. Gold-digging scam artists who never really loved you. The reality is the states and territories don't exist. It's the federal government that's in charge, except, of course, when it comes to the Ruby Princess and people dying in aged care facilities. In any event, the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, wants our borders open by Christmas, and I cannot wait to open them up. I wonder what we'll get. Anyway, borders schmorders, as the PM says.
Australia wasn't built to have borders.
Yes, just as Jefferson's Starship built their city on rock and roll, our founding fathers built this country on free intercourse between the states. Now, of course, most of the actual building of this country was carried out by the traditional owners, but when Captain Cook came to take possession of it back in 1770, there were no New South Wales health officials to tell them not to get off the boat. They were free to go wherever they wanted and infect whoever they wished. And that's how it should be today. The PM is also showing everybody that he's in charge by threatening to tear up Victoria's Belt and Road Initiative deal with Beijing. Now, the Belt and Road Initiative is a complicated arrangement. Essentially, and I hope I'm not oversimplifying it, it's about the movement of things. Perhaps it's best explained by this official Chinese government Zoot review.
Kimmy, ever heard of the Belt and Road?
Yeah, the big vision of economic change.
No, what exactly there?
The belt is along the Old Silk Road, and the road is the Silk Road on the sea.
OK, so the belt is the road and the road is the water. But going down this belt is causing problems for the federal government, who described the action as a threat to sovereignty, leaving Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews in some pretty hot road. But what's at stake here? Well, fortunately for us, the Chinese government have also prepared this video. And just a word of warning, this is actually real.
Extensive consultation, joint contribution and shared benefits.
Sound international trade policy, and you can dance to it. Mind you, Scott's got problems with China as well, and not just all that wine dumping we're doing over there. How many people watched the Deputy Chinese Ambassador's address to the National Press Club last week? Everybody? Great. Then you'll remember this hot take on Australia calling for an independent inquiry into the coronavirus outbreak in Wuhan.
I think it's approximately identical to Julius Caesar in his final day when he saw Brutus approaching him. Et tu, Brute.
Yeah, it's a pretty accurate comparison, isn't it? Although from memory, Caesar said "Et tu, Brute" when the knife was actually going in, rather than when he saw Brutus approaching. Presumably, if he saw Brutus approaching and holding a knife, he would have thought something was up and run away. Still, I don't want to be culturally insensitive. Maybe there's a different version of the story over there. Maybe, like the Tiananmen Square massacre, it never happened. Julius Caesar wasn't assassinated. Brutus and the senators were all arrested during a crackdown for breaching Rome's national security legislation, and they were taken to re-education camps in Xinjiang. And Julius Caesar continued on, building islands, launching cyber attacks, manipulating currency and banning Winnie the Pooh because people say they look the same. The truth is, though, we here in Australia respect China and they respect us. They know a lot about Australian culture, as the Deputy Ambassador assured us.
We're not changing Australia to be a People's Republic of Australia. We're not asking Hungry Jack to sell Chinese dumpling.
And that's good, because the last thing we need over here is Chinese dumpling dumping. So, China, if you're watching, I want to have a word with you. Come over here. If you think your one country, two systems model is a bit fiddly, be grateful you don't have the one country, seven systems model we've got. Our Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, is trying to wrangle 7 Hong Kongs here, and he's not getting any helpful data from TikTok like you are. But you've got to be careful with what you say, don't you, Bobo? Because it's a sensitive and diplomatic area, isn't it?
Well, the Chinese are a bunch of thin-skinned babies, it's true, Shaun. But on the other hand, no man is an island. Although if he was floating alone in the South China Sea, the Chinese would certainly try and turn him into one.
If you have a disputed territory, though, does making it bigger dilute the dispute because you spread it over a larger area?
Well, regrettably, no. And quite frankly, we don't know what the solution is. And we tried sending Maurice Payne and/or Linda Reynolds, I can never tell the difference, over to America to have a photograph taken with Mike Pompeo, but that didn't seem to help. Right. And this is a trade matter, so we can't afford to have an operational moral compass.
What about threatening China with our new long-range missiles?
Well, we could, but while a customer in a 7-Eleven is able to pull a knife in order to threaten the shop attendant into handing over their money, that same shop attendant can't then pull a larger knife in order to scare the customer into buying a Slurpee and a packet of barbecue shapes. Especially if our knife is a submarine being built in Adelaide that won't be finished for 30 years.
Yes, we're caught in something of a cleft stick, aren't we?
Well, yes and no. Yes, the Chinese can build those reefs above the sea. But as any lonely sailor who has ever been seduced by a dugong knows, what the ocean gives, it can very quickly take away. With a bit of luck, unattended global warming will raise sea levels high enough to submerge the islands back beneath the waves where they belong. So continued investment in fossil fuels is effectively an investment in strengthening the strategic defence of this country. Exactly, Shaun. Brown coal, gas drilling, fracking, it's all part of protecting our nation's sovereignty. But what if the water doesn't rise far enough? Well, then we increase the fracking!
Oh, Mickey, you're so fine, you're born my man. Hey, Mickey. Hey, Mickey. Oh,
I've got to do each tentacle, so this might take some time.
All right, then. Well, in the meantime, coming up, this footage of Melania Trump reacting to Ivanka just because I like it. Plus, aged care minister wanders off and is later found disoriented and confused in the backyard of a neighbour's property. He really does need someone to look after him, doesn't he? And it can't be Scott Morrison all the time. Scott's got quite enough on his plate as it is, what with not apologising for Peter Dutton, Angus Taylor, Michael Sukkar, the National Party, and, of course, as always, Stuart Robert. In fact, the awkwardness continued for Mr Colbeck this week when a reporter came up with yet another question he didn't have an answer for.
Are you going to resign, Minister?
No excuse for not knowing that. You finished yet?
No, still going.
All right. Well, for the moment, though, Senator Colbeck has the Prime Minister's backing, which must have come off in the bath, prompting Anthony Albanese to wonder...
Can it really be the case that there is no one on the government backbench who could do a better job than Senator Colbeck?
I'm very certain of one thing, there's no one who sits over there who could.
Kitty has claws. Actually, I think it's a bit unfair accusing the opposition of not having anyone who could do a decent job for them. I mean, Malcolm Turnbull made it to Prime Minister and he was a Labor stooge.
smooth operator.
At the end of the day, though, it's not about how many people have died or who's responsible, it's about the economy. And the fact of the matter is, the second lockdown in Victoria has cost us another 400,000 jobs. And if that's a number you find hard to get your head around, Treasurer Josh Frydenberg has a more helpful way of thinking about it.
That's the equivalent of 4 MCGs full of people on grand final day.
Yeah. Now, he could have just said it's the equivalent of 4 MCGs full of people, but he specifically said 4 MCGs full of people on grand final day. And that's because the 400,000 people at the MCG is only equivalent to the 400,000 people who have lost their jobs, because the pain and misery of losing those jobs is comparable only with having to sit through grand final pre-game entertainment. And if that's not bad enough, those working are in for some disappointing news too, particularly those looking forward to this year's legislated increase to the superannuation guarantee, with Assistant Minister for Superannuation Jane Hume saying that there's a trade-off and that workers who don't get pay rises over the next 5 years can blame a lift in the superannuation guarantee. Is there really a trade-off, Assistant to Jane Hume, Benina Puff?
Absolutely, Shaun. If employers have to pay more in superannuation, then they're going to pay less in wages.
Yes. Darius, you're a more relatable character.
Really?
If the super guarantee didn't increase, is the Assistant Minister saying wages would?
Of course, across the board. It's the same for everybody. We're all in this together.
Is that right, though? Because members of Parliament receive 15.4% of their salary in superannuation.
Shaun, you're being an economic girly man. Just because we receive more doesn't mean we're not allowed to argue other people should receive less.
Yes, but given MPs receive roughly 6.5% more in super than average earners, you'd expect that on that logic, you lot wouldn't have seen a wage increase for ages, would you?
Sure.
Whereas, since the early 90s, politicians' salaries have risen with the average wage, including a rise of 31.3% in 2012, making the base salary about $207,000.
What's your point?
Well, with a super guarantee already at 15.4%, it does rather suggest this notion of a trade-off between wage rises and increased super is just the government shitting on our leg and telling us it's a brown kitten.
Shaun, we nearly have a vaccine deal for the COVID-19.
Don't try and distract me.
No, I don't want to gaslight you, but the states are to blame for our economic problems, particularly Victoria.
Yes, well, thank you, Darius.
Fantastic.
The federal government, though, is helping us dig ourselves out of the hole we all find ourselves in together. They've handed out the tools, JobKeeper, Seeker, Maker, Trainer, for you to dig with. And yes, they cost billions of taxpayer dollars and make the hole deeper, but they've also given us access to up to $20,000 from our super, and that's bonus dirt you can use to climb on to keep your head above water as the hole fills up from a burst pipe. And I think Benina would agree with me on that point.
Oh, yes. It's been very popular. In fact, there's been such a run on superannuation that roughly 500,000 Australians now have none left.
Well, isn't that a problem?
No, because as Jane said on behalf of the Social Services Minister, Anne Ruston...
The government isn't in the business, though, of telling people how to spend their own money. This is not necessarily taxpayer money. Overwhelmingly, it is their own savings that they're spending.
Is that right, though?
What?
Well, that it isn't the taxpayers' money.
Absolutely not, it isn't.
Yeah, but the money is in their super account because they were earning income and paying income tax. If the people accessing that super are paying tax, isn't the money they're accessing, by definition, taxpayers' money?
May I speak on behalf of Tony?
Please.
It's only taxpayers' money if the government's spending it, Shaun. If it's the taxpayers' money, though, then it's none of our business how it's spent.
But
Then before you start whittering on about how the government can't be trusted to spend the money wisely anyway, don't forget that 64% of the money that people withdrew from super was spent on discretionary items, such as takeaway food, gambling and alcohol. So taxpayers can't be trusted to spend their money wisely either.
Yes, but you'd still rather taxpayers spend their own money than you having to spend taxpayers' money.
Sure.
The thing is, if people spend their super now, aren't they more likely to end up on a government pension later?
I suppose.
So more people will be receiving taxpayers' money in retirement?
Yes.
At which point they'd be spending taxpayers' money, not their own.
Keep going, almost there.
So then you could tell them how to spend it.
Well, we'd hate to see them waste it, Shaun.
But not all the economic news is bleak. And after the break, with the federal government looking very seriously at lifting the ban on the importation of exotic parrots, we take an audience question and put it to pet shop owner Barita Diath. Could you make yourself known, Barita?
I'm the only one in the audience, Shaun.
Ah, yes, yes. Now, don't we have parrots here in Australia? Why do we need to bring in ones from overseas?
Shaun, the sad fact is that our wild parrots are unwilling or unable to do the kind of work that parrot fanciers are looking for. All they want to do is stay in rural areas, visit farms and pick our fruit, whereas our customers are looking for birds that are happy to stay in inner cities, be fed and pampered and generally rewarded for looking good and not contributing anything of value.
That's interesting. Well, thank you very much indeed, Barita. Would you like to throw to the break?
Oh, OK. I'm Barita Diath. Say hello to your mum for me.
Oh, terrible.
A royal commission on fire has everyone hot under the collar.
Mum! Can you stop hogging the shit NBN? I'm trying to do my Year 12 NAPLAN prep.
Mummy's got to get this report done, sweetie. Well, the PMO'll have my arse in a sling for garters.
Icarus isn't even real, Mum. Mr. Wolohorsky says it's just a Greek legend and he didn't even come close to nearly flying to the sun.
If the new Religious Freedoms Act that they'll never get past teaches us anything, Billy, it's that people can believe in whatever gods they want, no matter how stupid they are.
There are people trying to kill me. A drama so gritty, it'll get under your skin and cause a serious infection.
You in the next scene?
Nah, just this montage.
Yeah, me too. 5:30 this morning I had to come in for hair and makeup.
Same.
You're only going to see us for a split second.
Helps create the illusion this is a real ad, though, so probably worth it.
Guess. Thing is, I worked all this complicated backstory out for my character about having a therapy Lamington dog for this trauma I suffered as a child on my birthday, and now no one's ever going to appreciate it.
So what's your dog's name?
I don't fucking know.
Fire is hot. Prometheus stole it from the gods. Can boil kettles. Why, this report is brilliant, particularly the cover.
We wanted to put some glitter around the edges, but we didn't have a glue stick.
What's all this wee stuff?
Oh, that's urine.
Enid Swink, returning back shortly.
Welcome back. Now, a warning to those of you at home who are easily appalled to look away now as we check out what's been making headlines in the Daily Telegraph.
Thanks, Shaun. So first up, we've got snow day to be out.
Yeah, I'm not interested in that one, but I'm interested in this one here about the arrest of conman Peter Foster.
Yeah, up Shirt Creek, party's over for Pete. Now, we changed shit to shirt.
Yeah, I know.
By adding in the R there. See?
Yes, but what is the significance of his shirt as far as the story goes?
It's very close to shit.
I'll say.
That's the sign of a good pun. It's the closeness of the two words.
Is it? Well, then how do you explain this one here? The Masked Presenters.
Yeah. The Masked Avenger. That's a thing, isn't it?
Yeah, well, see, presenter and Avenger aren't even close to being close, are they?
Just a bit of fun. Doesn't have to make sense.
Well, that logic presumably would explain this next one about Hugo Weaving returning to the theatre. If Hugo back to the stage, then I'll go too.
Yeah, because Hugo sounds like you go.
And who's the I in I'll go too? Well, it's the audience, presumably, isn't it? Shouldn't it be, if Hugo's back on stage, then I'll go too?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's much better.
Finally, a story about the physical abuse of an ice skater. Hit and kicked, but no one batted eye.
Yeah, so battered sounds like, battered. Like, you know, eye. Just a bit of fun.
Now, we were talking about China earlier, but to be honest with you, it's really too big a topic to be tackled by a small pretend news show like ours. To do it justice, you really need a big pretend news channel like Sky News and geopolitical experts like ex-rugby coach and the man who played FDR in Little Orphan Annie, Alan Jones. Although he and I are singing from the same songbook. And mercifully, I don't mean this one.
Love changes everything.
I mean, on the subject of China, where he says, we may all be becoming Neville Chamberlains, asleep at the wheel and seduced by China. And Alan's right, although I believe the correct plural is Neville's Chamberlain. You know, we are a country of 25 million pre-war British Prime Ministers, but due to lack of infrastructure investment, only one wheel. And we're all crammed in behind it to drive down China's Belt and Road. But perhaps because the seatbelt's too tight, as stretched as it is around so many of us, we've lapsed into unconsciousness, allowing China sitting in the back to seduce us by whispering erotically into our ear, much like Hitler seduced Neville Chamberlain, as seen here in this frankly pornographic photograph that I am surprised we're allowed to show on television. And as Alan points out, it's worse in our universities, where China is
bribing Australian academics with perks and salaries.
Perks are bad enough, but paying academics a salary? Something our own government, I'm proud to say, has too much integrity to even consider. Coming up, China deals with its damaged international reputation by sacking its roster of Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokespeople in favour of someone used to surviving cancel culture who can at least work a room.
Seriously, this whole Hong Kong situation, it's a big misunderstanding. Xi Jinping made it very clear that the elections are only postponed for a year. Although, you know, the last time Xi was up for a 5-year term, he was made president for life, so it sounds like it might be a long campaign.
And still to come, with self-isolation fast becoming the norm, what's the point of being a hermit? But right now it's time for a bit of unbiased balance with two sides to everything. All right, the COVID-19 vaccine, should it be mandatory or compulsory? Dale Gherkin from anti-vaxxers are wrong, or are they? If it's neither, how do we convince a sceptical public to get the jab?
Well, Shaun, as a proven conspiracy theorist, I am deluded enough to have faith in our government. I believe they are more than capable of running a secret international campaign to control our minds and steal our land, even though all the so-called evidence points to them being unable to find their own arse without a globe of the world, probably because the Earth is in fact flat.
Cynthia Marmaduke, who has an Instagram account devoted exclusively to pictures of her cat, you're suspicious of the vaccine but attracted to it for that very reason.
Oh, yes. I support whatever it is they're up to. In fact, I am so desperate for the vaccine, I would happily eat any associated tracking chips by the handful. My only reservation is that I'm scared of needles, and I don't see why they can't just administer it to us using 5G or by mixing it in with the chemtrails. I mean, surely Qantas could use the extra flights.
It's a reasonable point, isn't it, Dale Gherkin?
Oh, absolutely, Shaun. My only reservation is that these two systems, the one to infect us with coronavirus and the other one to cure it, is exactly the kind of big government waste we were hoping to avoid with a one world government, of which I am also a big supporter.
Me too. I think it's about time we had someone in charge.
Well, we seem to be in furious agreement, so in an effort to stir up some controversy online, I'll open the floor so those dancing will fall into the pool. Is there a crystal flange in the audience?
I don't have to tell you my name.
Now you are a contrarian?
No, I'm not.
Oh, touché.
Bless you.
And your question, which as I understand it, is about Clive Palmer registering his awards claim against Western Australia in the Supreme Court.
Well, it's all very well for Clive Palmer to choose the Supreme Court, but what if you prefer your court without pineapple?
That's a good question. Cynthia?
Yes. If you think you know the answer, have a guess. And the nearest correct answer will win a Champs-Élysées Morgan. Enjoy driving along this life-size replica of ABC's The Business Host as originally landscaped by André Le Notre in 1667. Très bien.
Now, I'd like to pause, if I may, and address an important historical milestone from last week. Just as we remember Neil Armstrong for being the first man on the moon, we will now all remember Labor's Richard Marles for being the first Australian MP to ask a virtual question in Parliament, apart from when the government gets backbenchers to ask Dorothy Dix's. Here's Richard's question, and it was a beauty.
How many more aged care residents have to die before the Prime Minister accepts full responsibility?
The PM declined to put a number on it, and in fact a couple of weeks earlier the Minister for Aged Care...
I'll just have to look up my latest report, Chair. That might take me a moment.
...was also unable to come up with one. Mind you, they're not the only government ministers who didn't have important numbers at their fingertips when it counted.
I've given up. I've lost count of the number of people who've come to me, Mr Speaker, and said, thank you.
Now, speaking of Michael McCormack, there are renewed rumblings about his leadership, with reports of pressure being put on him to step aside before the next election. And this despite personal endorsements from National Senator Matt Canavan, who went on record saying, and I quote, "I support him because the party room does." And also despite Michael possessing a charisma that holds all those who hear him positively spellbound.
And a recovery funder providing support across the nation in such areas as agriculture, the arts, fisheries, tourism and aviation, and such things as the international...
Media advisor to Michael McCormack, Byro Prance. Is his leadership tenuous?
Oh, not in the slightest, Shaun. The entire National Party is right behind Michael with concealed weapons, presumably to fight off those who want to depose him, of which there aren't any, as I just said, because of his universal popularity and our totally united and deeply content party. And as Michael said, the number of people who've come up to him and said, thank you, David, because no one remembers his name, well, he's lost count, Shaun. He's got no idea, and not only on those numbers, but he just cannot keep track of how many it is. So there's obviously something wrong with his brain, which would make it very cruel to sack him, which no one is thinking of doing anyway, such as the widespread love and everlasting affection he engenders and will continue to engender for as long as he lives, and perhaps beyond if he can, as those unspecified numbers of people requested, continue to lead us as a zombie.
Well, thank you very much, Byro. Mind you, while some in the party say the spill is off, others say it's on, and still others say...
No, it's not.
But for definitive clarity on the issue, as always, it's best to turn to Barnaby Joyce.
McCormack Morrison is going to be one of the greatest stars, and is going to ride all the way to the election like a famous Western.
And if that's not support for McCormick, I wouldn't be surprised.
We get a lot of nutcases coming in here and ranting at our staff about all sorts of wacko conspiracy theories, which I admit a lot of it goes beyond my training as a colour matcher at the paint counter, but we are here to help.
Illuminati solar garden lights, $4.95. Flat earth movers, 20 grand.
Bunnings recognises many of our customers are concerned about protecting themselves from Bill Gates' mind-controlling 5G global pedophile rays while they might be outside sanding a deck or chlorinating a pool.
Pocket edition of the 1948 UN Charter of Human Rights, $28.57. Self-sealing arguments, $3.
Whatever nonsense you believe, we've got you covered like chemtrails on a crop circle.
Anti-Vax Power 7 pet barrel reverse vacuum cleaner, 5 for $1,000. False flags, $8.51.
And if you find a better price, it's probably a hoax, but as you people keep saying, do your own research.
Bunnings Warehouse.
Well, to regional news now, and after a 2-month review into Rio Tinto's blasting of the Juukan Gorge caves, the company has decided to strip CEO Jean-Sébastien Jacques of his 2020 bonus of $4.8 million, while its corporate affairs chief and iron ore boss will each lose about $1 million. Later, I speak to spokesperson for Jean-Sébastien Jacques, Philately Karp.
Shaun, just to be perfectly clear, these executive bonuses are gone.
Gone?
Completely gone. For the whole financial year, yes.
And those bonuses will never come back?
Well, let us never say never, you know.
Well, the caves won't be coming back, though, will they?
Well, you can hardly compare what our executives used to be paid with the value of an Aboriginal heritage site that no longer exists.
Yeah, because you blew them up?
Precisely, yes. We exploded them. But in our defence, I must say that the caves were very old and run down, and I think in another 45,000 years would have probably eroded away from the natural processes anyway. But I am sure that our continuing explosions in the area will create brand new caves, which we would be more than happy to offer our Aboriginal friends at the most reasonable rate.
Yes, but this was a priceless heritage site.
Not anymore.
Well, thank you very much, Philately.
Yes. Yes, I know that.
But right now, with a roundup of the news.com.au headlines, here's Lydia Rowlands.
Thanks, Shaun. Former addict's jaw-dropping new look. Mind-boggling detail in star's nude photo. Sex book lands hubby in hospital. Weird way Aussies eat Weet-Bix. And Supercars porn star unveils $15,000 butt lift. Kind of explains Google's reluctance to pay for Australian news content, doesn't it? Shaun.
Thank you, Lydia. Well, Australians are paying too much for gas, and I'm not the only one saying it.
Australia's consumer watchdog says Australians are paying too much for gas.
So why don't these idiots just pay the correct amount, you say? Can't they read? Are they innumerate? Well, you've jumped the gun there and embarrassed yourself, because what the watchdog means is that Australian gas companies are exporting their gas, if you'll pardon the expression, overseas at much lower prices than they're charging us here. Here's Rod Sims from Beautiful Blinds for all your window furnishing needs.
This is the largest gap between international and domestic prices that we've ever seen.
In fact, we might be better off importing our gas once we've already exported it overseas. But the government and the opposition agree that this scenario is really hurting what remains of Australia's manufacturing industry. Shadow Energy Minister Mark Butler filed this report from a toilet.
Yes, we agree that Australian manufacturers need relief. They've needed relief for 5 years.
And maybe they could relieve themselves if we stepped out of the toilet. And sidebar question, what happens to shadow ministers when the sun isn't shining? Anyway, these stubbornly high prices for gas create an existential problem for Energy Minister Angus Taylor, because...
That's what Angus Taylor is the minister for, to get prices down.
So if he's the minister for getting prices down and he doesn't get prices down, does Angus Taylor cease to exist? Does he just disappear? Like a page on a Sydney City Council website. Lydia.
Tired of falling off your high horse? Can't ride the dead one you're flogging? Keep getting thrown by show ponies? Then you need a pair of David Spears Spurs. That's nice.
Well, not coming up because Utopia's on in a minute. University support package unveiled. And Queen crashes Zoom call. And finally, in what passes for sport on this show, Huawei has quit as the Canberra Raiders' main sponsor. And that's a shame, because with the government's concerns over data breaches, if there's one football team whose name is a perfect fit for Huawei, it's Canberra Raiders. Goodbye.
一路来到了欧洲，这里的红酒提前半个月送到家门口，比雷埃夫斯港的肌肉。